So Honda Aquatrax Turbo Removal. Once you've undone these oil lines, which there's one just down there as well, I've just covered over the ends with plastic and rubber bag. This is the bottom feed line that is hard to get to, and it has these two small 10mm bolts. There's two of them for that setup there. So when you remove those oil lines, the bottom one is the last thing you remove. You remove the intercooler pipe and lift that up out of the way. Then imagine your turbo's still here. You take the cover off of the impeller connector there. Get that out of the way. You'll also be undoing the clamps on this, taking off of that air inlet that goes that way around, that goes into the side of the turbo. So you undo them, take that off, and with the turbo still in place down there, so for instance, just imagine the turbo is still sitting in the wastegate housing there. You need it to be able to come out of the housing and then tilt on the side so that you can get to these bolts underneath. Well, that's where the bolts are for that bit down there, that oil line there. So that has these two bolts, 10mm bolts. So by undoing this clamp here, so you undo that completely so that that bolt is out of the way, and then you can lift it off, remove it, and when you do that, the turbo itself can release from the wastegate housing. Once it's released, slightly tilt it on the side, and then quite simply use a 10mm spanner to start undoing each of those two little bolts. The bolts undo the oil feed line down there, or oil return line, whichever one that one is, drops out of the way, and then you can easily just lift your turbo out. I then move everything out of the way as well for when it's time to install. I've got a little margarine or butter container down there just to catch any oil if any was going to leak out. None did. Now the process for putting the turbo back on can be difficult when you're dealing with these small, not very long 10mm bolts. So what I do is I temporarily use a longer 10mm bolt. What that does is it allows you to line up at least one of these holes when you put the bolt in from underneath. One of these holes can line up a lot easier with one of the threads there on the bottom of the turbo. So once you've got one hole lined up with the longer bolt, then it's fairly easy to use your fingers to start threading one of these small bolts through. And because the turbo is tilted on the side slightly, you can get your hands to everything in here. And once you've got one of the small bolts started, then you can take the longer 10mm bolt out and then put the second short 10mm bolt in, and then do it up accordingly. Obviously you'll have a gasket there as well. Here is my new gasket. So that essentially is the little trick to removing the turbo, by taking this clamp off of here. And you take that clamp off of there, allows the turbo to pop out from the wastegate, and then you can tilt it, as I mentioned, to get that particular oil line off, and then having it tilted to put that oil line back on with the longer bolt as a temporary bolt. Then you can eventually have both the smaller bolts put on, and then when that oil line is bolted up, at the moment I've just got a bit of silicone hose rubber blocking that, so no debris gets down inside of it, but obviously I'll remove that when it's time to put the turbo back on. And then once that line's done up, I can push the turbo back into place and put this clamp back on to hold it where it needs to hold. And you can see that there's a little locating pin there as well. So you can see there, the little locating pin right at the bottom of this wastegate housing. And at the spot on the turbo, you'll see as well, I'm trying to see in the dark here, sorry about that. There we go. There's the hole there. I can't point to it, but you can just see it at the bottom of that rim there. So that's the hole that will line up with the housing accordingly. Then you can start bolting the other oil lines back on, taking the plastic covers off of them, obviously. Bolt your air pipe back on, your cover back on down there, push your intercooler pipe back in place, do that up, and then obviously I've got hoses that I've pushed out the way, and I've got these vacuum lines as well that came off of the turbo on the wastegate that I've just pushed out of the way, so it gives you plenty of room when you're pulling out the turbo. This is a R12X turbo, 2005. F12Xs don't have this part here in the way. It's a slightly different exhaust setup on the R12s to the F12s, but the process of doing that with the oil line underneath is the same for both Aquatraxes. I hope you found this helpful. So with the turbo, taking out the long temporary bolt that was underneath, down in there, put the two small bolts in, used a 10mm spanner this way on this side. When the turbo was tilted off to that side, you can get this spanner onto the side of it, and then slowly but surely tighten it up. And then again, while this was tilted that way, I could reach behind it, put the spanner this way, in behind, underneath, and slowly but surely keep lifting it off, putting it back on, slowly but surely doing it up. Put this clamp back on, hold it all in while you're doing up the clamp. Obviously there was a locating pin, so once the locating pin's in, then the clamp will go in place. And I've just got a mirror down the bottom here. You may be able to see in that mirror there is the bolts at the bottom of, let's see if I can pull light down there. The bolts at the bottom of the turbo there, sort of. There, some better light. There in the left of the mirror there, you can see the oil feed line, and you can at least see one of the bolts there. Don't think there's a better way for this light to go, but never mind. And you'll notice in the bottom of the hull as well, I've put a rag. And it's because you accidentally drop things every now and then, and it's best to just land on a rag rather than going down in underneath the motor somewhere and difficult to retrieve.